want to thank Mayor Ross and Fire Chief Kemp for hosting us. I'd also like to thank CFO Jimmy Petronis and Police Chief Ken Albano for joining us. We also have a number of elected officials. We have Senator Kelly Stargel, Senator Darrell Roussan, and Representatives Jackie Toledo and Mike Beltran. So I want to thank them for all their hard work and what they've just done during this legislative session. One of the things that, I asked the legislature to do a lot, because that's just, you got to make the most of your time. And but one of the things that we asked to do was, given all that our first responders have had to do over the last year, we wanted to be able to do something to recognize the sacrifice and the service to communities throughout Florida. So a few months ago, I called for bonuses of $1,000 for all sworn law enforcement, fire, and EMT personnel in the state of Florida. And I'm happy to report that in the budget that was passed last week, the legislature has responded, and we've been able to secure in the budget those $1,000 bonuses. Now, we have a lot to go through in the budget. There's a lot of line items that I scrutinize. Many of you remember we had the budget done last year, really prior to the full force of COVID being felt on the economy. It was, I think, the second week of March, and if you look at the last 2 weeks of last March, you saw huge differences, and really the world changed in many respects. So I scrutinized. We vetoed $1 billion out of last year's budget, because we wanted to make sure that Florida was going to be fiscally solvent. We didn't know what was going to happen, but all through that I had confidence that this state was going to respond and was going to bounce back. And the result is now the budget that was passed by the legislature throughout the whole last year, we never had to spend one penny from our rainy day fund. The budget that the legislature passed last week actually doubles our rainy day fund. And the revenue is coming in so strongly because the economy is doing well, that even when they revised the estimates, so the most recent revisions were done, I think, the second week of April, just a few weeks ago. And if you look April, May, June, the last 3 months of our fiscal year, just in April, we're coming in revenue $750 million above what they had just forecast, and they had forecast significant revenue increases. So you're looking at, even if you do a little bit more in May or June, not even at that level that we have in April, you're looking at another billion, $1.5 billion, conceivably $2 billion more dollars in revenue that we weren't even counting on when we did this budget. And so it's very possible that after we do the revenue, see what comes in, after we do some line item vetoes, we could have about $10 billion in budget reserves. That'll be more than Florida's ever had in our history. So we weathered this way better than anyone would have anticipated. Most people were saying that Florida was going to have the biggest economic hit of anyone because we're a service and tourism-based economy. We made sure the state was open. We made sure people had a right to work. We made sure families had the right to send their kids to school in person. And the result is we have unemployment much lower than the national average. And that's with one of our major industries forcibly closed by the CDC, our cruise ships. We have a suit in federal court in Tampa where we're going to try to open this back up. Those folks have a right to work too. And if you look at that, we're 4.7% unemployment, nation is 6%, and that's with the cruises shut down. So if we open the cruise, that's tens of thousands of jobs that'll ever be able to be added. But we've bounced back, we're helping to lead the nation, but we've also now protected ourselves against whatever may happen in the future that's unforeseen, with a rainy day fund that's strong, with these budget reserves that's strong, and obviously with doing what we're doing here today to say thank you to people that have been on the front lines from the beginning. You know, there's a lot of people in our society that had the luxury when COVID hit of working from home, doing Zoom calls, doing all that. And I don't begrudge anyone for doing that. That's fine if that's what you could do. But these folks can't respond to an emergency on Zoom. They've got to be in uniform and they've got to be there. And when people are calling and they need help, these guys have got to be there, and they have been there and have served in a variety of capacities throughout the pandemic to help our communities. And so what the legislature did by answering my call was the right thing to do. It's a way for us to say thank you for folks who've worked so hard on our behalf. Now the budget will need to be signed. We're going to have to go through all the line items. It takes a little bit of time because there's a lot of money at stake, but we will do that. And then once that budget is signed and the funds get released, we're going to start getting these checks out. I've told my Department of Economic Opportunity, I said, start getting ready, be ready to go, and we want to get these checks out. So I do think, we will see those checks coming out throughout the summer. So it's a good day to be able to celebrate a lot of great things that happen in the legislative session, but very few things that I'm more proud of than being able to deliver for our first responders. And so we're going to hear from a couple other folks. I think, Jimmy, you going to say a few things?
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for having me here today. Florida's fortunate to have a governor who prioritizes and fights for our first responders, as he's done with the $1,000 bonus that will come in their pockets this coming year. Governor, I was just talking to some of the men and women here, and they were just reminiscing and talking about the signing of the cancer bill that you did for them and the number of people that has benefited in this particular profession. That would not happen if it wasn't for your signature. But you kept this state running in unprecedented time. I applaud your leadership, and no doubt we show the gratitude with your gesture and your leadership with the $1,000. Our firefighters have had unprecedented challenges, as they'll have a little bit of extra love in their paycheck. That's not going to make up for the type of sacrifices they've taken away from their family, their friends, and their loved ones as they have fought through the COVID-19 pandemic. We met with our first responders back in January as we were trying to assess their preparedness in fighting COVID-19. This past legislative session, we fought for the necessary resources to make sure they continue to have the cancer decontamination kits and the matching dollars. We can partner with the state and partner with our mayors and local government in order to get them the resources to protect our heroes and making sure that these cancer-causing chemicals that are a hazard of the job do not get in and interfere in their will and ability to live a normal life. Our firefighters work on the front lines every single day, and we appreciate what they do to support our communities. I love to tell people that, you don't have good schools, you don't have good investments, you don't have great businesses open up in the state of Florida unless you have this robust 24/7, 365 safety net that works on holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, anniversaries. That's exactly what these heroes do every single day. So, Governor, thank you for being here. Thank you for looking out for our first responders. I'm forever grateful for your priority over these men and women.
Great.
Well, welcome everybody to Temple Terrace, and Governor, we're very happy to have you here. I can tell you from first experience, getting thrust into the role of mayor at the beginning of the pandemic, that it was very reassuring to have your leadership in Tallahassee. As you know, and everybody here I think knows, first responders are a vital part of the backbone of our community. If you don't have public safety, you don't have anything. You don't have a good budget, you don't have security, if you don't have public safety, you have nothing. And so thank you and to the legislature for approving this. Thank you for coming to Temple Terrace, and we're very supportive of you here and thrilled to have you.
Great, thank you.
I just want to first thank the governor and the CFO and the senators and state representatives for showing up today and their support for first responders. I've been in this business for 30 years and have followed politics and have been on both sides of the union and Florida Fire Chiefs Association, and I have never in the last 3 to 5 years seen the support of firefighters and public safety and police officers from an administration more than I see now today. With the PTSD bill that is affecting firefighters and police officers daily, to the cancer bill that has personally affected people that I know, to this check that $1,000, and you're right, it's not gonna change their day or their month, but it's certainly it makes them know that they're appreciated and loved by their governor, CFO, and their senators and their state legislators. And I can't thank you both enough. And you're amongst friends here in Temple Terrace.
All right, thank you. All right, so here's the, like I said, we're $1,000 first responders. Coming soon, once everything's, the I's get dotted and the T's get crossed and the money gets released. It will happen though, so good job. All right. And we're also excited, and we'll be highlighting this, but you know, we did the same thing for teachers as well, and we were able to get that through. And the reason is a lot of these states, they kept schools closed for a long time. There's still places where they don't have in-person or certainly meaningful access to in-person education. That is a farce. That is a disaster. We led from the beginning here. We had the superintendents, we had most of the teachers wanted to go back, and we gave parents the ability to send their kids to school in person. And of all the things that were done, I think locking kids out of school for a year and a half is probably going to end up being viewed as the most destructive policy that any place in this country did. Unfortunately, we had a lot of enclaves in this country who did that and put the kids last and put families last. We didn't do that in Florida, but we would not have been able to do it without our principals and without our teachers. So I want to thank the legislature for delivering on that as well, because I think that's going to be very meaningful, and really a whole host of things. I mean, we were just signing yesterday in Miami and also in Vero Beach, early learning, just a really strong reform for early learning, which nobody was even talking about during, because it's like there's so many things going on. So there's some really significant things that are really going to impact people's lives that weren't getting a lot of fanfare. But nevertheless, I think they're going to make a difference. And so we're really excited about that. The final thing I'll just say is, you know, my two oldest kids, Madison and Mason, love fire trucks. And so they've been able to visit a handful of fire stations over the years, and they love to be able to sit up there, honk the whole, whatever, the sirens, they like all that. But it just occurred to me, you know, Mamie is 13 months. She's never been to a fire station yet. And so at some point, maybe in Temple Terrace, we'll come down and get that done. But I'm pretty sure she loves her older siblings, and if they like it, I know she'll like it. So we'll get that done at some point in the future. But thank you guys. Thank you for your service. You know, the bonuses are well deserved. And with that, I'm happy to take a couple questions. Yes, ma'am. So it's a good question. So the executive orders we did, first of all, I thank the legislature for passing a really substantive reform of emergency powers. I mean, the fact is, you can't just have open-ended powers. I think they've created a very responsible structure. There'll be accountability for the state, although I was using the powers to lift people up, not lock people down. But nevertheless, for local and state, it was the right thing to do. So we've instituted our order when that goes into effect statutorily, that all emergency are revoked. In the meantime, we've suspended all emergency. It applies to any organ of government that's doing an emergency order. If it's not emergency, if it's like normal policy, then obviously my emergency powers are really focusing on the emergency at hand. In terms of what we're doing in next school year, I know people have asked. The Department of Education has put out very clear data and guidance about what the school year should look like, and basically it should be a normal school year. That's what the data tells us. We know that because in Florida, many school districts, many charter schools, many private schools had normal school years. So that's what we want to see. Obviously, we're seeing more and more of that now anyways, but certainly when we come back, that's what we want to see. But that's something that's just apart from emergency power. That's more of traditional policy. So the question is about the FDA may do an emergency use authorization for, I believe it's ages 11 to 16 for Pfizer, or 11 to 16 is already there, 11 to 16. So the question is, should that be mandated? My answer is no. I mean, first of all, I don't know that we've ever mandated a vaccine that's only for emergency use. This has not gotten full FDA approval. I think the data's great. I mean, I had a vaccine. We're advocating people do it. But to have the government come in and say you must do something that literally is just emergency use. And I also question whether emergency use even makes sense when you're talking about young people. It makes sense when you're talking about senior citizens because they bore the brunt of the negative impacts from COVID. If you look at our young kids under 16, the impacts from respiratory this past winter was one of the lowest we've seen in recent times. In other words, fewer minors were getting admitted to hospitals for respiratory infections than would in a normal flu season. So to me, the need for emergency is not what it would be for an elderly, a nursing home resident, or other folks. So given all that, I would not support any government mandate. So here's the good question. So about cruise lines, we've banned vaccine passports. Some cruise lines, although many have not, but some cruise lines have said, we want to be able to have vaccinated passengers, we want to be able to show how you do. What I will tell you is there are major cruise lines that are operating in other parts of the world right now in areas where they don't even have vaccines available, much less the ability to do a passport, and have much more COVID than you have in the United States, and yet they're still doing it. They're doing it safely. It's worked. And so I think that they know they can do it. I think that that's what they'll ultimately do. But we oppose what the CDC has recently put out. I think they said you can sail if you show 98% of the passengers have vaccine. Well, guess what? That means families can't cruise because the kids aren't authorized yet. And even if this happens in emergency use, that's only for teens. It's not even for young kids. And so we don't think they have the authority to do that. We think our lawsuit, if successful, would obviate that as well. But if you look at what's going on in Europe and in Asia and other parts, these cruise lines are sailing. They have been sailing safely, even in areas where there's not widespread vaccine availability. In Florida, and in really pretty much every state now, the vaccine availability exceeds the demand for the vaccine. That obviously wasn't true in December. I mean, when we were the first state to do seniors, man, it was like the new iPhone times 10 in terms of the intense demand. Phone lines were melting down. People were emailing and going on websites. As we worked through and did hundreds of thousands and millions of seniors, the demand became more manageable. Now as the supplies increase, you're really down to folks who are either indifferent about doing it or are skeptical about doing it. But most of those people are in more of the low risk category. If you look, we've done over 80% of seniors for vaccine shots, which we're very proud of. But then even as you get into the 60 and 55, you have pretty good numbers there. As you get into the under 40, 30, then it starts the uptick is lower. So that's just the reality that we're seeing. The vaccine's available. We want to provide it however we can. Pharmacies, I know all the pharmacies have it. Anywhere else, we've given it to, we expanded eligibility because you did have people that weren't eligible under my initial executive order because they weren't Florida residents, but they work here most of the year or part of the year. And so we've said, look, if you're supporting a Florida industry, you too are eligible. And even with that, we still have a lot of supply out there. So we're going to continue to work with folks. We are going to do some public service announcements to try to get more and more. But that will be something that we're providing for people, making it available for people, but not mandating for anybody. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it.